Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be using some new stamp sets from Simon Says Stamp, and these happen to be two stamp sets that I designed for Simon. So this first one is Mom and Dad Icons, and it's kind of fun because there's lots of images that you can replace the O in Mom or the A in Dad, or just use them separately. And then I also have this background stamp called Cora, and it's kind of fun because there's lots of little hearts in here, and this was actually requested by Jennifer McGuire. She said, can you make an intricate, kind of elegant looking background stamp with hearts? And so I came up with this. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm using my Misty stamping tool, and I've removed the foam piece inside because I am using a cling stamp. And I've placed some Bristol paper inside the Misty. This is actually cut to 5 inches square, or actually 5.5, and I'm inking up the stamp with Versamark ink. I'm going to be doing some heat embossing and some watercolor resist over the top, so I'm using Versamark ink. It's a nice sticky ink, and then I'll be applying some heat embossing powder. I'm going to run my fingers over this, make sure the stamp has a really nice impression, and then I'll peel that up and I can start applying the embossing powder. So the white embossing powder that I'm using today is from Hero Arts, and I've been using this embossing powder for many, many years. It's one of my favorites. It does really great intricate details on your stamped images, and I just really, really like it. So I shook off the excess and then heat set that with my heat tool. I've now taped it down to a hard board so I can start doing my watercoloring, and I'm going to do a combination of ink smushing and marker coloring and things like that. So I'm going to be using a few different colors of Tombow markers. This first one is a nice pale yellow, and I've scribbled that onto a piece of acetate or a piece of plastic and then spritz that with some water. And I'll turn it over and bring it over to my embossed piece and kind of just use the acetate to move that color around. Then I'm going to scribble on some blue onto that same acetate sheet, spritz it with more water, and add that to my piece here. I want these colors to kind of be side by side. I'm also making sure that the colors are very pale because I'm going to be making a baby card, or kind of like a congratulations you're expecting card, and I wanted to have really pale colors. And I picked blue and yellow and gray in particular because the person this card is for is expecting a baby boy. So I thought that would be kind of fun to have a little bit more like traditional boy colors. I thought that'd be kind of fun. I have a really pale blue shade right here, and I've scribbled that onto the acetate and picked it up with a water brush. That's because I wanted to have a little bit more direct application with some of the colors. Brought in some gray into some of those heart areas. I later kind of sopped these up a little bit because they were looking a little bit too intense, but if you wanted to paint in some individual hearts or individual areas on this stamp, I think it would look really, really neat. So I'm going to go ahead and sop up some of that color like I mentioned before, and then I'll let this air dry until it's completely dry. So after it was dry, I peeled it off the board, and now I'm going to move on to the greeting area of the card. So now I'm using that Mom and Dad Icons stamp set, and I'm using the two M's and then the little baby carriage. And I'm stamping this onto some more Bristol paper because I'm going to continue using some Tombow markers for the coloring. I'm inking up the stamps with Versamark ink, and then I'll go ahead and swing the door of the Misty over and press down those stamps for a good impression. Instead of having these embossed in white, this time I'm going to use some silver embossing powder. And the embossing powder I'm using is from Ranger. It's their, I think it's superfine or ultra fine silver embossing powder. I've chosen to use silver embossing powder because I will be cutting out these images, and there's going to be a little bit of a white edge around the outside, and so I didn't want it to be kind of like white on white and have that mess up the edge. Plus the silver just adds a little bit of sparkle and shine to the card. So I've sped up the coloring process, but I'm basically using those same colors that I used on the background and just painting in those areas, adding a little bit of yellow to the carriage here at the end. So after that was dried with my heat tool, I then took some more gray marker and I just painted the top edge of this piece of Bristol paper. My plan is to stamp congratulations from that same stamp set over the gray and have that embossed in white. This is going to be kind of like a little banner shape above the mom greeting. So I'm using my MISTI tool to stamp that congratulations, and once again, I will use Versamark ink because it's very sticky and it's perfect for embossing. So I'll go ahead and stamp that down, and then I'll use some more of that Hero Art white embossing powder. And I love using the MISTI for stamping small words like this because it gets a really fine line, and then when you go to emboss, the words don't get kind of blobby. Then use my scissors to fussy cut around these letters and the images. If you have the coordinating dies for this stamp set, it would make it much easier, but I don't have those yet, so I just had to use scissors. Trimmed down my background piece to 4.5 by 4.5, and then I created a card base using Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock. The finished folded size of this card is 5 by 5. And I did it that size because then I can fit it into a regular 5 by 7 envelope, or I have some envelopes that are sized for 5 by 5 cards as well. I then wrapped some vellum around the background piece, and I originally hadn't planned to do this, which is why you see the foam tape there, but then I realized that I needed a little bit of softening of that background so that my mom area could go over the top and be a little bit more legible. So I'm adhering the vellum with some Tombow Extreme adhesive. I'll just press that down, and then I can go back to the card base and press the background onto that fog cardstock. And this time I will press it down very firmly since I know it's exactly how I want it. I then applied some foam tape adhesive behind the 2 letter M's and also the baby carriage. And then I took that little strip that says congratulations and I cut off the end at a diagonal using some scissors. I applied some very thin foam tape that I cut behind that congratulations piece and then adhered it onto the card. And that finishes the card for today. This video and blog post is part of a blog hop for the Simon Says Stamp release that just came out. If you'd like to see more inspiration, head over to my blog to hop along. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.